How many of you guys watch the US news? Now, how often do you guys watch it? Now, how many times have you watched it when they were talking about the legalization of marijuana? The legalization of marijuana has been all across the US, state news, and local news. It isn't a myth, more and more states are catching on. There's already 5 states that have made it legal. Washington, California, Oregon, Missouri, and Colorado have realized the health and economic benefits of legalizing weed. My main goal here is not to change your guys' opinion of once known gateway drug, but rather to enlighten you to understand the benefit side to making it legal. I will be outlining 3 main points that reflect the legalization of marijuana and will benefit the U.S. I will begin addressing the history of marijuana, followed by the medicinal reasons, and then followed by the economic benefits. Marijuana has been used for hundreds of centuries as a pharmaceutical and as a source of paper or even rope. After a while, the states began to ban cannabis because it is just another thing to take away after the alcohol prohibition. The first state to ban the use of cannabis was Massachusetts in 1911, and then shortly after followed by Wyoming, Indiana, and Maine. It's kind of crazy to think that our own state has banned marijuana for over 100 years. My first claim against the banning of cannabis begins with the simple thought of we did not know what it could do to us back in the 1910 through 1915. We hardly knew anything about cannabis, and the states didn't have a good reasoning behind making it illegal. Since it did follow the alcohol prohibition, many people thought that making cannabis illegal was just another thing to take away from the citizens. Now let me ask you this, why did alcohol become legal again but not cannabis? It's very difficult to understand the true effects of cannabis when they didn't have the proper medical experiences to perform any tests. Making it illegal back in the day is a faulty reason to why we should still keep it illegal. Another example of why marijuana should be legal is the health benefits it has on the sick. Marijuana falls on the medicinal benefits that it has on the sick in many ways. How many times have you heard about someone with cancer or depression smoking weed? Quite often. Even before the 20th century it was used for medicinal reasons in India, Egypt, and all across the world. In the turn of the 20th century, marijuana was used to treat asthma, bronchitis, and depression. In 1906, the FDA began labeling marijuana as a medicine, but shortly became illegal after that. New Mexico was the first state to make medicinal marijuana legal in 1978. In the current time, there are only 20 states that have medicinal marijuana legal. The first evidence I'm going to present to you is a study done by AARP, which is a group formed for older citizens. They did a survey to see how many members thought that the marijuana should be legal for medicinal purposes. This toll came to a shocking 72%. This means that nearly 3/4 of middle-aged Americans or older Americans believe that marijuana needs to be legalized. The next evidence is a direct quote of a study showing that states that have medical marijuana legalized show a drastically reduced amount of fatal car crashes. Here's the direct quote. States that legalize medical marijuana see fewer fatal car accidents according to a new study, in part because people may be substituting marijuana instead of alcohol. Comparing traffic deaths over time in states with and without medical marijuana law changes, the researchers found the fatal wrecks dropped by a total of 9% in states that medicinal marijuana is legalized, which was largely attributed to decline in drunk driving. The authors also found in states that legalized medical marijuana, there was no increase in marijuana smoking by teenagers, finding also finds. Last but not least, my claim will be about the economic benefit that legalization will bring. Think about how high the U.S. debt is. Think about how high the U.S. debt is. You may think it is $1 trillion. Well, it's actually right here. Averaging $2.73 billion a day. Now let's think on a smaller scale, such as Wyoming debt, which is $4,310 per capita, which is nowhere as bad as California with $617.6 billion in debt. Now imagine if there was a way to cut off that debt by 1/4 at least. Studies show that tax legal marijuana could drastically change the debt and change the whole entire economy for the better. Making pot legal has tons of positive effects on the economy. Consequently, the legalization of pot has drastic impacts on the U.S. as a whole. As the DEA Administrative Law Judge Francis L. Young would say, a smoker would theoretically have to consume nearly 1,500 pounds of marijuana within about 15 minutes to induce a lethal response. In strict medical terms, marijuana is far safer than many of the foods that we consume. For example, eating 10 raw potatoes can result in a toxic response. By comparison, it is physically impossible to eat enough marijuana to induce death. Coming from our own DEA member, it's kind of hard to avoid the positive effects that legalizing marijuana would have.